Okay, so here I am in the basement again, doing yet another indoor training ride. I think in the last 2 months I've probably only done, I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 rides outside, maybe more than that, but it seems like a while. Anyway, I'm gonna do a trainer ride, get some miles in. I'm gonna try to have some fun and do a little experiment where basically I weighed myself right before I went out for the ride here, and I'm gonna weigh myself afterwards to see how much I sweat throughout this time. Even if it's relatively cool, if you're inside, you know, you don't have that wind blowing over you and facilitating evaporative cooling. If you're inside and the air is pretty static, or even if you have a decent fan on you, but it's really like a fraction of the amount of airflow that you would have when you're outside, it's really easy to heat up quite substantially. And riding indoors in like 70-degree weather might feel as difficult as riding outside in maybe 100-degree weather from my experience. Anyway, I think it'll be fun to see how much weight I lose and see how much water I'm sweating out throughout this ride, and then extract some thoughts and insights about that. And specifically for this ride, I'm gonna try to do a little bit more of like a high tempo threshold type ride. If it was cool out and it was like, if it was the dead of winter and it was 40 degrees in here, I would probably aim for a little bit higher power. But since it's hot and I know that I'm gonna overheat over time, I'm just gonna try to keep the power like elevated, make it feel like work. But because I know it's gonna be warm, I'm gonna keep my target lower than I would if I was outside or if it was cooler in here. Should be fun, and I don't know, sweaty and miserable in its own way, but also fun at the same time. So I'm about 57 minutes into my ride. I just went up the Zwift version of Alpe d'Huez, and now I'm just soft pedaling down after the climb, and I'm so hot. It's pretty incredible. I think right now my heart rate's dropped down to like 115 because I'm just like sitting here, and I started having some extra water. I've gone through 2 bottles now, and it's not even an hour into the ride, and I'm just like drenched in sweat. So far this ride has been very successful. I was trying to average like 350, 360 something going up the climb, and I definitely can't do that a second time. If it was cold, if I was out in the real world and I had evaporative cooling from the wind blowing over me, that'd be another story. But inside, just like, it's not even that warm in here. It's maybe like 75, maybe 80 at the most. But I'm just like roasting, dripping sweat. On the one hand, riding on the trainer, especially being a bigger person with more power, it's just not possible to do the same amount of power that I could outside, especially for any length of time. But at the same time, it's a great workout, all the more so when I'm just like dumping sweat and my heart rate's another like 10 or 15 beats higher than normal, because I'm trying to dump all that heat, and your body's way of doing that is to sweat. But when you don't get all the evaporative cooling, you're not cooling off enough, so your body just sweats more and more. And especially after years as an endurance athlete, your body gets like more and more efficient at dumping water into the environment. Luckily, your body tends to get better at retaining salt when it's doing that, but you're still losing a ton of water and a ton of salt. And that's a part of the the game that I'm playing today, is I want to weigh myself after I get off the bike. I'll see if I can get up Alpe d'Huez again. This time I got up in like just over 50 minutes. If I can get up it in an hour and not just completely collapse from feeling like I'm overheating, that's gonna be a good accomplishment. The fact that you have a higher heart rate while you're indoors, that makes it maybe in some regards a better aerobic workout. You're not necessarily creating as much metabolic demand that's gonna require your body to produce as much new enzymes to burn fuel at a higher rate as you would if you're doing more power. But the higher demand on your heart can be a good cardiovascular workout. So if cardiac output is a limiting factor for you, doing indoor rides or doing rides that specifically get your heart rate elevated for extended periods of time to increase its maximal output or its maximal output for sustained periods of time, can be a very worthwhile activity, even if your power isn't necessarily the absolute max that it could be. So that's one of the benefits of training the heat, whether it's inside or outside. Okay, it's late enough and I've gotten hot enough that I'm gonna call it an hour and a half. So like 1.5 times the Zwift version of Alpe d'Huez, and I'm gonna go get some food and do some emails, and then weigh myself, and then check in the morning with finish to this video. Okay, so last night I did a pretty good ride. I rode for about an hour and a half on the trainer. I warmed up for 10 or 15 minutes, and then I went relatively hard up the Zwift version of Alpe d'Huez. I kind of coasted back down, just kind of soft pedaling, and then I went up again like pretty steady the second time. Not nearly as hard because I was roasting and pretty hot. And 5 or 10 minutes in, I was starting to break a good sweat. By 15 or 20 minutes in, when I was going up Alpe d'Huez, I was trying to maintain, you know, high aerobic but sub-threshold intensity. So I was mostly around like 360 or 370 watts. And, you know, outside that would not be a big deal, even if it was relatively warm out. But inside, with relatively warm conditions and just not as much evaporative cooling as you would experience when you're outside, I was just sweating up a storm. I was dripping sweat all over the floor and, you know, toweling off every few minutes. And before the ride, I weighed myself. After the ride, I showered. I didn't drink anything, and I weighed myself again before I had some recovery food and fluids. And so over the course of the ride, I lost 3 pounds of weight, just like net loss. So my body weight before and after. And while I was riding, I consumed 2 24-ounce bottles and 1 21-ounce bottle. So like 2 big bottles and 1 small bottle, just like standard issue kind of like water bottle sizes. So that was a total of 69 ounces, which is 4 pounds and 5 ounces. So effectively, over the course of a 90-minute ride, I sweat out almost 7.5 pounds of fluid. To put it in perspective, that's like almost a gallon. Granted, that's a lot, but it's also not the most that you could expect somebody to sweat out. But it's like, that's enough that you're gonna definitely see a big drop in your body's electrolyte content, and you're gonna need to replenish a few grams of sodium. Anyway, but that was a fun experiment. I had a good ride, and I got to see just kind of what my sweat rate is like right now. And it's not necessarily a bad idea if you're stuck training inside during the winter or during a time like this when it's smoky out. Just for fun, you could do that on a few of your rides. You could weigh yourself before and after and see how much fluid you're losing over a given period of time to get an idea of how much water loss you're experiencing and also how much electrolyte loss you might be experiencing. Obviously, it's going to be highly variable how much electrolyte is lost from person to person, but you can assume that you're losing at least a few hundred milligrams, if not a gram, of sodium per liter of fluid that you're sweating out. I don't know, I think that's about it. I'll definitely come back with more, you know, thoughts and analysis on different types of indoor training workouts that I do. But that was a fun session, and it was fun to see how much sweat I could produce over the course of an hour and a half. And, you know, given the fact that that was my average sweat rate, we know that during the more intense portion of the ride, like after my warm up and before the more chill, like last half hour, the 40 minutes that I was going up Alpe d'Huez after my like first 20 minutes of warming up, like I was probably sweating about a gallon an hour during that period of time. And I don't know, that's fun. It's like relatively high, and I don't know, I just like stuff like that. But that's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks, bye.